Hi, welcome. This is Luis Maimona. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist here in the state of California. I'm collaborating with Vince Vasquez to create some helpful webinars for how to have better relationships. Mostly we're talking about men and men in relationships. So if things aren't going as well as you'd like them to go, welcome, because you are in the right place. Let's talk about relationships, going all the way back to the days of Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote in Henry VI, "For what is wedlock? Forced but a hell, an age of discord and continual strife, whereas the contrary brings bliss, and is a pattern of celestial peace." And so the bard is not recommending marriage or relationships to us. This is not a good way to start a seminar on relationships, but let's look at the next slide. Let's see what we've been told about relationships. You can see that maybe he was onto something. Sure, the divorce rate's been declining, but that's because the marriage rate's been declining. Even so, 41% of all first marriages end in divorce. It gets worse for second and third marriages. What can we do about that? Let's see what advice we can get. Yeah, here's a couple of pretty bright, wise men. Keep your eyes wide open before marriage and half shut afterwards. That's not very hopeful. Here's Barack Obama. You might agree with his politics, but a lot of men, I think, would agree with what he said here. After about 15 years, I finally figured out she's always right. So surprisingly, we just stopped fighting after that. These two men came separately in their times to the same conclusion about what to do when you have conflict with your wife. Yeah, throw in the towel. Neither one of these is really saying engage with your wife, solve the problem, or your girlfriend. They're really saying just close your eyes, agree with what she's saying. And on the one hand, I think that's what we broadly accept in popular culture, that men don't have the power in a relationship that women do. But it doesn't have to be that way. So let's talk about how we can move ourselves forward and have more mutually satisfying relationships. I have a three-part recipe for relationship repair. The first part is sometimes the hardest. You know, as men, we tend to accept just the bumps and bruises of everyday life. We don't notice things. If something's not working out, we just grin and bear it and press on. But paying attention is the first step to fixing something. You can't fix what you're not paying attention to. Once you're looking at it, you can figure out what you need to do. And then once you figure out what you need to do, make the changes to bring it to fruition. B.O.L.O. That's cop talk for be on the lookout. This is what you need to be on the lookout for. Harsh startups, emotional flooding, body language, failed repair attempts, bad memories, and Gottman's four horsemen. So, according to Gottman, and they've done these three things predict divorce. So who are the Gottmans? That's the Gottmans. Dr. John and Julie Gottman. They're psychologists and researchers, and they have spent decades and decades looking at relationships. Their theories and practices about relationships form the basis for what you're seeing here today. So this isn't made up, this isn't invented, there's all evidence. Everything you're going to see here today is evidence-based. So the most obvious way to know things aren't going to go well in a discussion is if you start out yelling at each other, or if you say something snide. The most obvious indicator that a discussion isn't going to go very well is the way it begins. We call it a harsh startup. The next thing that happens when we're having a contentious moment, emotional flooding. So what is emotional flooding? That's when feelings are so strong it's hard to understand your partner's thoughts, feelings, behaviors, whatever she's doing. Makes no sense. She's saying things. They're crazy. She's lying. The thing about emotional flooding can happen to us too. And so we get into that same place where we're saying stuff we don't mean, we're doing things we don't mean, and then we end up in a world of hurt later, apologizing and apologizing. That's emotional flooding. The next thing to be on the lookout for is body language. Okay, so there's a saying that says most communication is nonverbal, and you might have heard about that. That's not actually true. If you think about most of your communication, like when I go through a drive-through and order whatever I order, there's no body language involved there. If I go to a bank, make a withdrawal, talk to a teller, there's no body language involved. Body language becomes more and more important as we escalate in our emotions. So when the feelings are flying, nonverbal communication becomes more dominant. And so take a notice if your heart rate is increasing, if your vocal tone is starting to get a little harsh, might be time to take a break. Failed repair attempts. Okay. So you're on your way to nowhere and you know it, and you try to stop it, but you can't. Because one or both of you has more to say. And when we're arguing, there's always more that we have to say. And then after the argument, holding on to that grudge. I'm still mad. Oh, I might bury it. As the song says, we're going to bury the hatchet, but leave the handle sticking out. How often do we do that? Just leave it, just easy access in case we need it again. Another indicator is, and how we think about our relationship. So, do we have fond memories of the early days? Were there those rough patches and we overcame them together? Is that how we think of it? Or are we thinking always about our fights? I need to think about the last fight so that I'm ready for the next one. Unfortunately, many of us get us into that pattern where we're always on our guard, always looking out for that next conflict because we want to be ready for when it comes. But we are self-sabotaging when we do that. Instead, if you want to be with the person you're with for the long term, think about the positive stuff. Gottman came up with, they labeled these the 4 horsemen. And to some degree, they're going to be there in probably every relationship. Honey, I can't stand your cooking, criticism. Or, could you do a little more around the house, criticism. Contempt, we see that name calling, or you're a liar. Well, you're with someone. People in romantic relationships get emotional and they use words like you're a liar or you're an asshole or whatever. That's contempt. The third one is defensiveness. I never said that. And stonewalling, which is the silent treatment. If any of those 4 horsemen are going on, these are all indicators that your relationship is not in a good place and that you're going to need to start taking some steps if you want that relationship to last. Okay, those are the warning signs. Recipe for relationship repair, we got to figure out what we need to do. So let's have a look at what these choices might look like. What do you need to do, first of all? So I do relationship counseling, I do therapy, I do couples counseling. And quite often people come into therapy going, I need you to, their complaint is about their partner because it's his fault, because it's her fault, because it's their fault. And the point is, it's not my fault. But the first thing you got to do is look at all that, right? What do you need to do? The harsh setups and the emotional flooding, all of those things. And realize that the only change that you can make is you. You cannot change your partner. The partner might want to change, and certain changes that you make might facilitate change in your partner, make it easier for them to change. But the focus of any work in a relationship must always be you. So we all have habits. Change what you're doing. It can be done. Here's the ingredients for relationship repair, the recipe, right? It's 4 pieces. Small things often, connect with the emotional bank account, say what you got to say the right way, and for God's sakes, be a better listener. Okay, let's start with small things often. Popular culture tells us the grand gesture wins the day. Like when you see a movie, you'll see the guy getting down on one knee in the restaurant or taking the grand vacation. What we know from the research is that small words, small gestures, small acts over time win over a lifetime. Here's what that might look like. I hope you can see this on your screen. You should be doing these at least 5 times a day if you want to have a happy relationship with your partner. Express fondness. I'm reading the first one. Express fondness for your partner with a physical touch or kind word. That just means giving her a hug, giving her a pat on the butt, giving her a kiss, or saying you appreciate her. Number 30, play a game together, preferably not a video game. Number 25, tell your partner they look nice, they look beautiful, they look handsome. Just little things. This is stuff we can do. Small things often, at least 5 times a day. The emotional bank account is an idea that I think is extremely powerful. Just like a real bank account, if you're in the hole, if you're in the red, you're in trouble. The way the account works is you put money in the account whenever you do something good with your partner, and whenever there's a conflict, money comes out. So when you're putting in money, and then something comes up, your account is positive, has a positive balance. What does that mean in practice? In practice, what it means is that I am going to trust that my partner means well. If I'm in the red, if I'm in a negative place, then I'm just getting the validation when I'm having a fight that my partner doesn't love me enough, doesn't want me enough, is lazy, isn't doing enough, is lying to me, is having an affair. Whatever it is that I'm thinking about my partner is exacerbated, made so much worse if we don't have this goodwill bank. But if the account is positive, even if she left strawberry jelly all over the door handle, we're going to assume that it was an accident, even though it's kind of hard to think it was. The emotional bank account. This is a tricky one, but almost anybody that's been in couples therapy has heard about I statements. I'm going to break them down for you and show them how they work. They're pretty straightforward. Here's the formula. It's a formula. It's like, damn it, you burned the toast again. Okay, so that's a statement that's a harsh startup. This is going to be the antidote for the harsh startup. So I feel, about, and I need. Let's put this into practice with an example. Next slide. I feel hurt when I'm not invited, and I need to know your schedule. This is how it might look. So I feel unloved when you burn the toast, and I need you to pay more attention when you're making breakfast for us. Or, well, I mean, there's any number of ways, and you might be the one making breakfast. It might be, I feel hurt when I make breakfast for you and you don't even say thank you. I need to feel appreciated. It's an I statement, and it's always better to use an I statement talking about I feel about this and I need that, rather than yelling at your partner. Listening. So this can be really hard, especially when we get escalated. Why do people have disagreements? Like, why would you disagree with me? because I'm generally a reasonable fellow. I give a lot of thought to what I say. And so if you disagree with me, it must be because you haven't heard enough of what I have to say. This is the logic that's going on in our brains. If I just talk longer and louder and faster, then the other person will agree with me at the end of the day. How do we know this? Because all you got to do is look at people arguing and you see exactly what happens. So what is needed is in fact the opposite of that. This reflective, we call this reflective listening. So you have to shut up. I mean, it's just so hard to do. But you must shut up and listen without judgment and without interruption. Invariably, if you're having a conflict, there's a dialogue going on in your own head that's like, but, and you're ready to rebut each one of these statements that your partner is making. But as soon as you're doing that, you're not really listening. You have to immerse yourself. Let's just think about everything that is them and really hear them, really see them. And then when they are done, say it back to them in your own words. And what you're going to find, particularly if you're a high conflict couple, is that most often you are not hearing what your partner is saying correctly, which is really weird because you know that you're a good listener and you're paying attention and you're repeating almost word for word what she's saying, and yet the nuance is still off. Why is that? Well, it just is. And so she'll go ahead and clarify her meaning. And I have found that when people actually understand what their partner is actually saying, what they're actually trying to convey, instead of what they thought they were saying, that in itself just de-escalates the conflict, because what the partner is almost always saying isn't nearly as bad as what the other partner was hearing. So then acknowledge your partner's feelings and perspective. It's important to note this doesn't mean that you agree with her. You can say, okay, I get where you're coming from, but then you can say, but I don't agree with that. I don't think that's true. Okay, so we identified some B.O.L.Os, things to change in your own behavior, negative behaviors you may be engaging in, things that you're doing that may be harming your relationship. And we gave you 4 guidelines, 4 ways, 4 tools, 4 interventions that you can use to make your relationship stronger. And so that brings us back to Shakespeare, and all's well that ends well. If men could be contented to be what they are, there were no fear in marriage. What does that mean? It means that mostly we guys are pretty good looking, pretty good guys. Some of us are pretty good looking, I don't know. If men could be contented to be what they are, there were no fear in marriage. It's really saying find a way to be yourself, your best self. As a man in a relationship, you do want to know what your partner is thinking and feeling and doing. She's important to you. So just be that man. And the man that struggles in marriage is the man that's trying to be more than he is. Like he's trying to be something that he isn't, that he's wealthier, that he's younger, that he's better looking, that he's more fit. All of these things that men think to themselves are going to be attractive actually aren't what makes it work. If you can be yourself, your best self, and follow the instructions that I provided, you're going to find that your relationship is most likely going to improve. And if none of this stuff works, then your relationship will be an improvement by ending. This is pretty much what I had to say. I got it done within the time frame. I'm very pleased with that. Let me turn the floor over to anybody that has any discussion points they want to have.
Yeah, Luis, we have a few questions here. All right, so this is a bit, I'm gonna try to, so what happens if your wife accuses you of something? She interpreted something a certain way, and you immediately reply that you didn't do it without a bad tone or whatever, but that just escalates it. And you've realized it's escalated, and what do you do?
Okay, so there's a couple of things. Um, when the wife says you did X and Y, and your response is I didn't, that's a defensive response. So you're on the B.O.L.O list right there. You're having a defensive reaction. That's one of the Gottman four horsemen. Instead, what we want to do is go to reflective listening. Your wife is someone that you married, someone that you believe in, someone that you love and trust, or at least loved and trusted. So it is unlikely that they are speaking to you with cloven hoof, right? So give them the benefit of the doubt. Where is this coming from? I mean, okay, so you're accusing me of something. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Can you tell me more about that? What makes you think that okay, so well, I saw you were texting so and so on the phone, and that text was inappropriate. It was inappropriate. It didn't feel inappropriate to me. I wouldn't have done it if it was inappropriate. Tell me, how is that outside the bounds of our marriage? Help me understand where you're at on this. So the I'm giving you the tactical game, but the strategic game is to recognize that when your wife says something like that to you, she's coming in hot. She's coming in hot. She's upset. She's angry. She's um, worried. She has a lot of things going on, and she's not going to be in a place to hear you, particularly if all you can say back to her is, "I didn't do it." That's not going to be a sufficient response, and it's not going to be heard well. Um, by that I mean that all the things that I said that a guy's got to do in a relationship flip the other way too. If a woman does them, if your woman would actually was listening carefully to the things that you were saying, then it might be different. But when people get upset, we have to. This is the emotional bank account, right? Because she's upset. There's got to be enough money in that bank account to make it worth it for you to really listen carefully, because your wife is upset. And if your wife is upset, then it's really hard to have a happy, healthy, vibrant, productive, loving home. So, how do you get to it? Well, the number one way to de escalate someone that's angry or anxious or really almost anything else is to give them a good listen. Let them say what it is that they're worried about. So, once you do that, the temperature de escalates. Once they've had a chance to say all the things that they've had to say, then they're in a much better place to be able to listen to your point of view. But coming in, particularly with that kind of an accusation that sounded like, it was bordering on infidelity, worried about infidelity. That's one of the really, really sensitive areas in a relationship, and it needs to be treated with a lot of caution and care.
Thank you. This next question is, so she came in hot and we are definitely arguing. What are some de-escalation tactics to put in play outside of doing a timeout and just kind of walking away?
Okay, so regarding walking away, I just want to quickly say walk away, but don't walk away forever, right? If you've got something that's going on like that, walk away for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe the next day. But don't just walk away and leave it buried, because when you just bury the hatchet, the handle is always still sticking out. It's always there. It's not resolved. Um, when someone comes in hot, by far the best way to go is to listen and try to be non-reactive. Now, if you have not done anything inappropriate and you're being accused of it, it can be really hard to not respond in an escalating way because you feel like you're being attacked, and maybe you are. Um, but this is not a relationship at work or on the street. This is your wife. This is your intimate relationship. This is where the love is supposed to be. And so that is why we must extend special grace to our spouses. So the answer is to listen carefully. And you will find that if you listen long enough, eventually she will calm down. Um, listen without judgment, listen without responding. Just try to hear what it is that she's saying. Um, it is very likely that if you listen long enough, she will discover that she is speaking from a place of her own insecurities. Maybe she is. I mean, maybe she found something that you shouldn't have been doing, but maybe it was really actually no big deal. Just listen. That's the best. That's the best thing. I'm just going to tack one more thing on why is it that there's like no rhetorical technique? Why is it that there's no brainy way to flip this around? And the reason is because the person who's coming in hot for whatever reason is closed. Emotionally, they are closed off. They're triggered. They're not in a place to really hear you or see you. And so you have to get back to a place where there is space to breathe on both parts of the dialogue. Otherwise, a meaningful and healing discussion cannot take place.
The next question was around building that emotional bank. Um,
Yeah.
you had also mentioned the doing the small things. Is that the way
Mhm.
to build the emotional bank? Like, what are the ways to build the emotional bank?
Small things, little things, anything positive puts money in, anything negative takes money out. So if wife greets me in the morning and I ignore her, that's a withdrawal from the account, even though it was really minor and even though I was on a rush to get to work. Um, walking, doing the dishes, even though it's not my night, that's going to be a big deposit. There's a joke among men, right? What do you call a man doing housework? Foreplay. Humor is really weird when it's just a video sonar like this, and you can't see if anybody laughed or even smiled. But yeah, people tend to think, men in particular, tend to think, I'm really busy during the week. I've got a job. I'm work, and then we get home, we get the kids, got to take care of the house. I got all these things, plus the game is on. Um, and so we tend to neglect our partner. And women have stressors on them too. And the nature of our society and our culture is that as husband, wife, particularly if we're in a family, we tend to look after everything else first: the kids' homework, the house, the bills, the school, going to work ourselves, the presentation for the boss, the sales document, whatever it is. And we trust that our relationship with our partner is fine. But your relationship with your partner, like any other relationship, needs attention. And so, this idea of the emotional bank account not only serves to build up goodwill, it also keeps your relationship healthy, fresh, active.
So the next question is a little bit of a transition from that. So if the relationship has been pretty disconnected and no intimacy for quite some time, are there some
Mhm.
strategies to kind of build that emotional bank to re-engage intimacy
Yeah.
when it's been like off the table for a very long time?
So, intimacy is an interesting word because we use it to mean many things. Sometimes it just means we're not having sex, and sometimes it means we're not having the human to human connection. Um, in either case, this might be an area where You want to get some professional advice. By that I mean see a therapist individually or as a couple. That being said, have a look, think about the last week of your relationship. How did it go? What did you do for her? What did she do for you? Was there conflict? A lot of times people in, okay, so the most, I've said a couple of times, when you bury the hatchet, the handle's still sticking out. And so what I mean by that is people sweep disagreements under the rug. And pretty soon the carpet starts getting these giant hills in it. And you can't walk around anymore without tripping over a hill in the carpet. And that's how the connection breaks down, because you're just not resolving issues. So when there's no intimacy in a place where there used to be intimacy, um, it is usually the product of a long time without doing the work of marriage, doing the work of relationship. And so start by doing the B.O.L.Os. What are we doing that is keeping us apart? And what are we not doing that might help us come together? You can't really get anywhere without really looking around. And then once you've done that, you're going to have to start emotionally risking conversations around the state of your relationship with your partner. What I mean by this is that there is something comfortable about non-intimacy. We're living like two roommates under one roof, and we do pretty well together in that regard. We share the chores, we share the bills. Neither one of us wants to end it, but neither one of us wants to put. But that's not really what you signed up for when you married. It's not really what you signed up for. And so somebody has to have the courage to step up and be the grown up and say, what is going on in our relationship? Why are we not connecting? Actually, having that conversation. And don't expect it to be a single conversation, because it won't be. The conversation might be along the lines of, yeah, I'm just okay. Everything's fine. But we all know that everything's fine is kind of a meaningless answer that we give when we don't actually want to have the conversation. So look at what you're doing, look at what you're not doing, take the inventory, change your behaviors, try out some different behaviors. And if none of that works, and if having that conversation doesn't get anywhere, then it's time to see a therapist, a couples therapist, an individual therapist, either way. Because intimacy is a need. I think we all have a need to connect with others, with a partner. We're biologically wired sexually, because if we weren't, the species wouldn't propagate. So if none of that is happening, then many of your most important vital core needs are not being met. And so if whoever's asking that question, I would encourage them to look deeply into themselves and commit to themselves to take action to move their relationship forward.
All right, Luis, I think that was a fantastic answer. I think we're out of time now. Is there any closing thoughts you'd want to provide?
Um, just gratitude to those that attended. Gratitude to you, Vince, for hosting this. I'm going to leave it back with remember Shakespeare. It can go bad and it can go good, your relationship. But you can take some charge and make your own relationship dream, whatever that is. You can make it come true, but it won't come to you if you wait for it. You have to take the steps. I'll say that. Thank you.